The stadium breathes as one living thing, a slow inhale that tightens into a roar. Floodlights spill like white water over a narrow oval of tartan. The night is raw and cold, but the air trembles with heat born of expectation. Somewhere among the sea of faces, a child would later remember the scent of wet rubber and popcorn, the metallic tang of sweat, the way tracks looked like promises, curved, patient, and inexorable. Olaf Beyer stands alone in that bright circle, only a strip of tape between him and a destiny that, until tonight, had been mostly quiet work and stubborn belief. He feels the rasp of his own breath, a metronome that has been tuned by years of dawns and diets and drills. His heart is a secret drum in his chest, beating not in fear, but in the steady cadence of someone who knows he has paid the price. Ahead, the starter raises his hand. The world contracts into a moment so precise that even sound seems to hold its breath. In the stands, voices fade. In the stadium lights, faces blur. All that remains is the track, the ankle snap of spikes, the smell of rubber and rain, the memory of every lap run in the dark. When the gun cracks through the air, Olaf doesn't run to outrun history. He runs because in that small, electric place between footfall and flight, he is most himself. Every step is poetry made practical, every breath a confession. The crowd erupts, but inside Olaf hears only the clean geometry of effort, a mapping of pain and possibility that he's learned to read like a compass. This is the moment when a life becomes more than the sum of its days. This is where Olaf Beyer, the son of modest origins, the product of meticulous training and quiet stubbornness, finds himself not by accident, but by design. He is not the flash-in-the-pan sprinter, the headline the next morning. He is the human being who learned to translate small, daily acts into a single luminous achievement. He is the boy who chased pigeons in an East German village and later would chase world-class rivals around the black ribbon of the track. He is the athlete who mastered the arithmetic of split seconds, learning that championships live in the margins where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Behind the stadium cheers are the kitchens where meals were measured, and his mother's hands that smoothed clothing with the same care as the coach smoothing training plans. Behind him are teammates who were brothers and rivals who were teachers, each contributing to the person who stands ready to sprint toward a climax neither entirely scripted nor fully expected. But this is also a story of contradictions. A man shaped in a system of rigid expectations who found in the looseness of a race the freedom to rewrite his place in the world. He became a quiet rebel, rebelling not through loud defiance, but through the singular insistence of performance. The tracks he ran on were more than circuits of sport. They were corridors through which memory and meaning flowed. They carried him away from small-town anonymity and toward an arena that tested more than speed, character, nerve, and the willingness to bear the strange loneliness of singular focus. In the flash of a finish line, there is the accumulation of thousands of ordinary mornings when he laced his shoes, tightened his jaw, and made the choice to do one more repetition, one more kilometer, one more cold sprint that left the skin of his legs speckled with gooseflesh, and the mind sharpened like a blade. And so this is not merely a race recap, it's an intimate excavation. We will follow him through the slow geography of upbringing, the texture of training routines measured in the whisper of footsteps at dawn, the taste of metal in the mouth after a hard interval session, the quiet domestic rituals that braced him for public spectacle. We will look closely at the setbacks that bent him, injuries that felt like betrayal, strategic missteps that tasted like failure, and the breakthroughs that unbent him, those luminous adjustments in stride or mentality that transformed the possible into the actual. We will live in his head at key moments, his doubts, his prayers, his internal pep talks, and we will listen as he learns that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to run with it. We will walk the days that preceded his greatest triumphs and the nights that followed, when quiet came and the world's applause shrank to a pulse in the ear. We will eavesdrop on dialogues with coaches, imagine the hush of tactical briefings, hear the clipped German of instruction, and the softer cadences of friendship. We will let the crowd's reaction be our chorus, gasps, cheers, the rise and fall of hope. And we will let the camera linger on small things, the flutter of a track jacket, the powder of chalk on fingers, the loneliness of a hotel bed in a foreign city. In these details, the biography gathers its gravity. And when the story reaches its summit, the stadium will dissolve into memory. The echo of spikes, the flash of a stopwatch, the face of a rival in the last 100 meters. And we will trace backward to understand how a modest boy engineered his large moment. This is a journey that bridges private endurance and public glory, a study of how discipline shapes fate. It is the story of Olaf Beyer, told not as a list of achievements, but as a human saga. Small choices braided into a bold life. Tonight, in the bright arc of the floodlights, he is both athlete and emblem. Proof that steady work, sharpened by belief, can carry a person to places even the loudest predictions didn't reach. And as the finish line approaches, every muscle remembers the first time he felt the electric friction of ambition. An ember fanned into flame by training, sacrifice, and a slow, stubborn hope. He remembers the village, narrow streets, clay roofs, the hush of winter mornings when the world smelled of wood smoke and possibility seemed distant but durable. He remembers a father who worked with his hands, calloused and careful, who taught Olaf that labor could be an act of love. He remembers his mother's laugh, rounded and warm, which braided light through the household like sunlight through simple curtains. As a boy, he learned to run before he learned to measure time. He raced cousins across a patchwork of yards, felt the wind as a companion, and discovered that speed carried a private kind of joy. School life offered structure, but sport provided a horizon. Teachers noted his discipline. A coach noticed something subtler, the way Olaf's eyes narrowed in focus during a drill, the way he accepted correction with the humility of someone who knows that mastery requires surrender. His teenage years were a terrain of apprenticeship. The early morning runs were ritual, a prayer in motion. 3 kilometers, then 5. Each stride a small ledger entry toward a larger account. Training plans were not glamorous. Tempo runs in thin light, intervals whose pain was both precise and personal. He learned to calibrate effort, to understand the geometry of a race, how to sit behind the surge of competitors, conserve the nervous energy of the group, and then let momentum carry him forward when the moment demanded. The track became a classroom in which the syllabus was patience. He learned that a middle-distance race is as much about timing as it is about strength, about the exquisite cruelty of waiting to unleash what you have saved for the end. There were setbacks, sprains that made him wary of pushing too quickly, illnesses that flattened his energy like rain on a parade. Each time the world forced him to pause, he discovered an inner architecture of resilience. An injury taught him to listen to the body, to respect its limits, and coax it back, rather than demand immediate obedience. He worked with physiotherapists who measured healing in millimeter changes, and with a coach who turned these small gains into strategic wins. The athlete's life is a work of small recoveries. The hero's tale is just the public name we give to a long string of returns. When he stepped onto national circuits, he felt both the pressure of expectation and the lightness of being known. His successes were increments, a personal best here, a tactical win there. Teammates became conspirators in the craft of improvement, sharing tips on pacing, laughing at mutual failures, celebrating small victories with quiet beers and louder stories. Rivalries sharpened him. Opponents were not villains but mirrors, reflecting back where he fell short and showing him what to aim for. He learned to read the economy of a race, when to spend energy and when to conserve, when to let others lead and when to seize the wheel. The breakthrough came not as a single thunderclap, but as a convergence of things. Years of steady work aligned with a clarity in training, refinement in stride, a new emphasis on the closing 200 meters, an altered breathing pattern learned through long, disciplined tempo sessions that were boringly repetitive but surgically effective. There was also a psychological shift, less obsession with competing against names and more focus on racing against his own best. He began to define success not by beating others, but by transforming himself into the version of an athlete he knew he could be. On championship nights, the stakes felt enormous, but Olaf had learned to translate fear into focus. A race is a short story, with a beginning, middle, and end. The middle is often long, the end sudden. He practiced the timing of his efforts until it felt like a muscle memory of decision-making. In the last lap, when the crowd's roar compressed into a single point in his brain, he summoned the quiet voice that had guided him through training. Trust the work. Trust the legs. Trust the breath. He remembered his mother's hands smoothing his jersey, and his father's steady nod in the stands. He felt his coach's instructions, crisp and economical, like radio commands that cut through traffic. There were races where technique failed him. There were nights when the legs betrayed him and tactics misfired. He learned that defeat teaches traction, each loss a map to a missing supply of courage. After disappointment, he retreated not out of shame, but out of hunger. Hunger to correct, to recover, to return with a better plan. Training cycles became experiments in incremental improvement. A tweak to the strength routine, a different warm-up, a new mental rehearsal. He visualized races in his head, ran phantom laps in hotel rooms, practiced the final 100 meters in slow motion, until the timing of his surge was as familiar as his name. As he rose in prominence, the world around him altered. Sports officials charted his progress. Journalists hunted for narrative hooks, and supporters began to look to him as an emblem of national pride. Yet he remained grounded in the small rituals that had formed him. The first cup of coffee in the morning. The stretching routine that began with a particular song on the radio, the way he folded his kit after every session, as though tidiness could ward off chaos. Fame brought attention, but it never rewired his focus. He still favored anonymity in small things, reading a book on a quiet afternoon, visiting friends, finding consolation in conversations that had nothing to do with victory. The races that defined him did so through a blend of physical prowess and tactical intelligence. In the middle distance, the gamesmanship is as vital as the gait. Positioning, timing, and the ability to read the body language of opponents can win as surely as raw speed. Olaf cultivated an acute race sense. He could feel when a rival's stride shortened, see a shoulder tighten in a way that indicated fatigue, and sense when to move. That sense was honed through thousands of miles of repetition, and a willingness to lose sometimes in order to learn how to win later. There were moments of pure public elevation. A final stretch where spectators rose from their seats as if pulled up by the athlete in motion. The electric hush before a surge. The stunned silence that sometimes followed an upset. In those instances, the world seemed to catch up to him. But also, there were quieter triumphs. The day medical tests returned clean after a scare, the morning when a rehabilitation set resulted in a feeling of restored confidence, the evening when a training partner stopped mid-run to say, "That was your best pace today." These private validations mattered as much as any medal. They were proof that progress is 1,000 small acknowledgments, stitched together into a larger garment of competence. He learned to carry luck lightly and preparation heavily. In competition, randomness could tilt a race. The subtle gust of wind at the last curve, a competitor's stumble, the imperfect geometry of the pack. But you can only add so much to fortune with training. Most of an athlete's job is to create conditions so that luck either favors you or matters less. Olaf's philosophy was to manage variables and to be ready when openings presented themselves. And then came nights that would etch his name into collective memory, moments when everything synchronized. In those races, his body felt like an instrument tuned to pitch-perfect resonance. His start was poised, his mid-race positioning economical, and his final burst both inevitable and brilliant. Crowds remembered the way his last 200 meters bent and then shattered expectations. Commentators fumbled for adjectives. Rivals nodded, not in defeat, but in recognition of art. After such races, there were backstage scenes of quiet elation. Teammates congratulating him with grins that said more than words, a coach wiping his eyes, a family member cupping his face with hands that trembled. The aftermath of victory is complex. There is joy, yes, but also the weight of attention and the strange solitude that follows spectacle. Olaf learned to treat success as both gift and instruction. A win does not end the work, it redefines the standard. He continued to train with humility, knowing that someone somewhere was waking up earlier to chase their own version of triumph. He used victory as permission to aim further rather than as a reason to rest. At the same time, he honored the simple pleasures that had sustained him. Quiet dinners, walks that were not part of any training plan, the laughter of friends who loved him outside the stadium. As the arc of his career bent toward its later chapters, he faced the inevitable questions that all athletes meet. How long can the body keep pace with the mind? When does experience outweigh the diminishing elasticity of youth? He answered not with melodrama but with pragmatism. adjusting training loads, emphasizing recovery, and investing more in tactical acumen. He became a student again, learning from sports scientists about biomechanics and nutrition, from younger runners about new training techniques, from physiotherapists about maintenance. Aging did not mean decline so much as transition. He learned to savor the crisp clarity of a race done well, regardless of finishing place. Beyond the track, Olaf cultivated interests that made life richer. Music that soothed post-competition nerves, books that expanded his view beyond the stadium, friendships that reminded him of simpler rhythms. He wanted a life that had room for the ordinary: groceries, gardening, the comfort of a familiar route through town. Athletics was his craft, but it did not define his entire identity. His narrative is not merely a chronology of wins and losses, but a portrait of a person who balanced ambition with humanity. He was generous with praise, quick to credit teammates and coaches, and cautious about self-congratulation. He believed that greatness is porous. It leaks outward into the people around you if you let it. He mentored younger athletes, sharing not only technical tips, but also the psychological tools needed to navigate pressure. How to quiet the mind, how to frame success, how to stay present in the blinding light of competition. There were losses that stung, races where strategy misfired, medals that slipped by centimeters, seasons shortened by injury. Each loss taught him to recalibrate expectations and to find the dignity in persistence. He learned compassion for himself, understanding that the body is not always an obedient instrument, and that sometimes courage means accepting imperfection and still stepping forward. That acceptance became a source of strength, the ability to endure not despite weakness, but because of it, to gather the frayed pieces and fashion them into renewed purpose. In the quiet moments between seasons, he reflected on what sport had given him: discipline, perspective, friendships, and a map of personal limits and how to redraw them. He felt gratitude for the people who had scaffolded his life: family, coaches, teammates, and those nameless early morning streets that had first taught him to run. He came to understand that legacy is not only measured in trophies, but in the lives you touch and the standards you set. When he finally stepped off the competitive stage, it was with a sense of peaceful completion rather than theatrical exit. He moved into roles that allowed him to give back: coaching, advising, speaking about the virtues gleaned from athletics. He found solace in the rhythm of sharing knowledge, in the satisfaction of watching others find their stride. He told young runners that victory is seductive, but that the deeper prize is the person you become in pursuit of it. His story is a study in balance, the fine line between ruthless commitment and human tenderness, between the solitary grind of training and the communal exaltation of competition, between the pursuit of speed and the cultivation of wisdom. It is a reminder that sports can furnish not only medals, but moral education, teaching obedience to discipline, resilience in the face of failure, and generosity in triumph. As the final lap in our tale circles toward the present, imagine Olaf in a quiet stadium at dawn. The stands are empty, the track gentle underfoot. He runs, not for medals, but because the rhythm of motion remains an honest prayer. He breathes in the cold air and remembers a boy chasing pigeons, a mother smoothing a jersey, a coach issuing commands that had become a kind of liturgy. He smiles, feeling the continuity of a life ordered around practice and passion. The stadium is now a place where memory and present meet, where each step whispers of the efforts that built a life worth telling. To the viewer listening now, the arc of Olaf Beyer's life offers a simple mandate: pursue your craft with consistency, temper ambition with humility, and recognize that greatness is earned by the thousand small acts you repeat when no one watches. Let this story be an instrument of encouragement. Take from it not only images of stadiums and medals, but the deeper truth that ordinary days, stitched together with discipline and care, can yield extraordinary outcomes. If you felt moved by this journey, if you want more stories behind the medals, the trials, the quiet practices, the human hearts who run, leap, and fall, then join us at Behind the Medal. Like, share, and subscribe to help these stories find more ears and encourage more athletes to tell their truth. Your support keeps the lights on and the stories running.